Now, what's interesting about the reflexes is that these are the movements that actually build the brain. That's why they're way down here with the chemistry, okay? Because the brain grows through movement. If we didn't move, we wouldn't have brains. Plants don't have brains, right? They don't move. They don't need to have brains. The reason we have a brain is because they just need water and a few other things. But they don't need to move around, so they don't need brains. So movement is what wires the brain. And we start out with these reflex movements, and then we expand our choices beyond that, and we always return to them. But if the reflexes don't happen the way they're supposed to, what happens? Okay, so let's look again over here. Now, if you picture reflex development as a wave, okay, the reflexes emerge, they develop, and they integrate. And there are many, many reflexes, and they are timed to come in at different times. Some come in utero, many of them do. Some come in after the baby is born. Some of them mature into other ones of them. Okay. And like a house of cards, I had my little pyramid here too. Let's just have a little reflex pyramid to look at. Okay, so hey, say this is an early reflex. Say it's fear paralysis. And say something happens. Fear paralysis comes in at about 7.5 weeks in utero. That's very early, right? And it matures into the moral reflex at about 12 weeks in utero. So the first trimester you're dealing with fear paralysis. That's the freeze response. So you can think about a little fawn hiding in the bushes, you know, so the predator doesn't find it. And you just, when you're frozen, you don't want to breathe, right? You don't want anyone to know you're even alive. Okay, that's that reflex. Now, if something happens, theoretically, during the first trimester, say the mother has a shock, or an injury, or 9/11 happens at that time, or there's many things that can happen. There's a toxic reaction, or a death in the family, or anything. Anything can be traumatic, and many things are very traumatic. We kind of downpedal how traumatic life can be because we need to go on. But when we're really looking at these kinds of issues, we need to acknowledge that things can be extremely traumatic. And so in a normal state, you know, this reflex would come in and then it would mature into the moral. But if something traumatic enough happens and safety is not achieved, then what can happen is that some of that reflex just gets stuck. And so maybe fear paralysis, we're going along and suddenly, whoops, you know, someone dies in the family, the mother's really upset, and the baby freezes, and the mother's so upset that this little piece of fear paralysis never moves. It's holding that trauma. Okay, and so then Moro comes along. All right, so the Moro reflex happens on top of fear paralysis. Okay, so can everyone see this little diagram here? So what happens to a structure if you're missing a brick at the bottom? Yeah. So there's Moro. It's missing some spots. And then, you know, the next reflexes to come up, well, they may be missing some spots too. Maybe this one is here, but that one's still there. And so now we get a trigger. Say, what happened with the mother? There was a death in the family. Okay, so say up here, the child is 3 years old and a pet dies. Okay, so what happens? Suddenly, you're a 7.5 week in utero baby. And those are the responses you're having, and that is your reality. And no amount of logic can help you, because actually that's what's happening. As far as, we can put our hands back here, as far as the back brain's concerned. That's what's going on. Because when we're in trauma, there is no time, right? It's always now. I mean, it's always now. It's always then. It's never now. That's the problem with trauma. It goes over and over and over again. And so that's why when a reflex gets triggered, a reflexive response gets triggered, and people seem to have these completely over-the-top reactions. What they're actually experiencing is something else. It's not happening now. It's sort of a post-traumatic stress disorder model of what's going on. But if you think of it in terms of reflexes and developmental movement, what's literally happening is that the experience that you have is triggering a series of reflexive responses that never got to move all the way to here. Maybe it was so traumatic, it stopped here. Maybe it stopped here. Maybe it stopped here. But it's stuck. That developmental place is stuck somewhere, and when the trigger happens, you go right back to wherever you were then. And it's very hard. And this is really important to realize, because when a reflex is activated, there's no point in telling a child to use their words. They don't have any words. Okay, they're in reflex mode, or expecting them, or thinking, this is just bad behavior. It's actually not. They are in stress. They're acting out of trauma, which isn't to say it's okay, but they actually can't help it. And so what you need to do in order to get to a place where you can actually work with a child is to get them out of stress. Because no child or person who is in that kind of survival stress is able to learn anything, because they're back in this part of the brain. And this is where automaticity is. It's not where, it's not here. Here's, everybody put your hands on your forehead. This is, forehead. She's got it.
Not head, forehead.
So what's here?
Frontal lobe,
Thinking, planning, executive function. Okay. So, what do we clutch? Good grief, right? You go right for here. What you're doing is you're bringing attention to that part of you that can do the creative problem solving.
That means that you forgot something.
Yes. So if you put your hand here, does it help you remember?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay.